All right, class. Today we're going to work on building our outlines out a little bit. If you haven't had a chance, there's a quick video on me doing skeletal outlining. You don't have to feel obligated to watch the entire thing. I'm just kind of showing you the process by which a skeletal outline gets constructed and ideas get generated. If I were actually doing that one for a speech, I'd probably just settle on one arch to talk about. But anyway, we digress. So now we've got our topic. How do we then start plugging in the research that we do? What does the research phase look like? Research phase is where we actually start building out the outline. And I want to point out, we're still operating mechanically, right? We still don't need to have any special inspiration. We don't need to have arrived at some sort of special, insight. This is still not a place where writer's block should be able to trip us up. Okay, what we're doing is we're just looking at data that we can come up with, and rather than putting it on note cards or hiding it away somewhere, we're going to drop it directly into the skeletal outline. Okay, everything that we gather goes straight on in, just like the video. If you haven't had a chance to watch it yet, watch it after this video, and you'll see how research just goes straight on into the outline. If it doesn't fit, it can always be removed. That's why we leave it in outline form. You can get rid of things that you don't want really, really easily, okay? So you're just going to start with stuff that you know or that you think you know. You're going to drop it straight on into the skeletal outline. If you're making a big assertion, then you might need to, for something that you just happen to know off the top of your head, you might need to write cite next to it. I just put parentheses and then in big capital letters, cite. That reminds me that I'm going to need to find a source for that information and circle back to it later. Usually this is what I do when I'm just generating ideas and filling out an outline. So now basically you have a list of topics that you can begin to research. So I tend, when I know nothing about the topic that I am looking at, honestly, I'll start with Wikipedia. And I know that you've probably been told don't do that. Wikipedia is a good place to start for organizing your thoughts and for sort of getting a lay of the land. Never cite Wikipedia. That's really what you should have been taught. Wikipedia is not a source to cite, but just like you see in the video for building out the skeletal outline, when you scroll to the bottom of Wikipedia, there's usually a whole bunch of really good references. So click on those, follow those references, and use those for citations, right? All you're doing is when you're looking at Wikipedia, just getting a lay of the land and an idea of how you might organize your thoughts. After that, you're going to go citation surfing, right? You're going to look at the reference list. There's going to be good sources there that tell you interesting things. You're going to look through them. Whenever you look at any particular, especially scholarly sources, at the bottom of that, they will also have a reference list, which can give you other directions for things to look at. This is called citation surfing, where you're just looking through the literature that's been produced on something. Do not read every single article that pops up, right? Don't read, even if there's an interesting article, don't feel like you have to read the entire article. Just get the gist of what it's saying and keep citation surfing, right? You're building an array of ideas here that by citation surfing and knowing what it is that will be able to be supported in your speech. When you're looking for sources come in different levels of quality. I know that in high school you were told primary sources are the best. Primary sources are not the best, okay? Primary sources oftentimes reflect an individual's opinion on a matter. I am working on a kind of sorta book about how animals taste, the animals that you'll never get to eat, like the ones at the zoo. And I found a primary source from Dr. Livingstone, actually. It's a story too long for video. But I actually had Dr. Livingstone's journal. And in it, he writes about the experience of eating hippopotamus. Now, that's as primary as a source can get, right? It was his actual handwritten journal. and he recorded what he himself thought hippopotamus tasted like. So why is that not great? Well, he doesn't like African food. Like, he's a British guy, and everything that he ate in Africa he hated, and so all he really did was complain about the taste of hippopotamus. That doesn't really answer my question, right? Like, that some British guy thought that hippopotamus didn't taste good, right? So he might have been a primary source, but he wasn't the best for telling me. It's sort of like, if you want to, you're gonna go to Giliberto's, and you've never been to Giliberto's before. It's that Mexican place that's like halfway down the hill, right? You're gonna go to Giliberto's, and so you ask a friend who has been there, right? That friend is a primary source, and you say, "Hey, friend, what is it that you liked at Giliberto's?" And they say, "The only thing I liked at Giliberto's was the soda that I had." And you go, "Oh my goodness, why is that?" And they say, "Well, I don't like cilantro, and I don't like spicy food, and I don't like Mexican food, so I really hated it there." Okay, well, they're a primary source, but they're a crappy primary source because they don't like Mexican food. So don't listen to that. If you like Mexican food and are interested in Giliberto's, then they're a terrible source of information. They're going to tell you, like, get the chicken nuggets or something, but don't get the chicken nuggets at Giliberto's. It's a terrible idea. So what's a better source than a primary source? A better source is a peer-reviewed journal article where people who actually know what they're talking about are writing things that other people then are criticizing and tearing apart and improving. Peer-reviewed journal articles are way better than primary sources because the information is going to get more towards what you want. Use Google Scholar to get to these. And if you're not able to access an entire article through Google Scholar, do not fret. Just copy it and paste it into the Bethany Library website. And they will either be able to immediately bring it up for you, or they'll be able to get it on interlibrary loan. For digital articles, interlibrary loan only takes like minutes usually. The longest I've ever had to wait is 24 hours for a digital copy of something from interlibrary. So peer-reviewed journal articles by far the best. Secondary sources have their uses, right? Like, I'm still going to quote Livingstone being obnoxious because it's funny. So that still has a use. Secondary sources are next. This is stuff like textbooks and so forth. I don't like textbooks for the exact same reason I don't like primary sources. They usually represent a limited number of people's ideas on something. Better to have a journal article or several journal articles about something. Newspaper articles or any serious journalism would be next, and then finally magazine articles and less serious journalism. I had somebody ask me the other day, where do websites fall on this? Websites can be any of these, right? All depends on the website itself, right? I access most journal articles online. Tons of people, if you're writing about, like, I don't know, Ethiopian food, then there are going to be people in Ethiopia who are writing about the food that they like and how they make it. They would be a primary source, right? So all of these things are reflected very well online. You'll just have to identify them from the context of the article that you're looking at. Once you've got some thoughts down into your skeletal outline, this is a good place to stop this. This is a good place to stop this video and watch the other one if you haven't done so already, or at least watch a little bit of it, okay? Because then we've got this list of ideas. We've got this list of topics now, and it's awfully wooden. It doesn't sound very interesting yet. And so now's where we start fleshing the outline out by supporting these ideas. Basically, we're going to be answering a few questions. What do you mean? How do you know? Why should I believe you? The big question we want to be answering is, so what? In some ways, all speeches are persuasive speeches because you have to convince your audience that what you are saying matters. If you don't answer any of these questions, if you just give information and there's no real reason or context for it, we tend to call that, sort of speaking, hot air. If you don't have support, our points tend to become generalities. And generalities, as we talked about before, are boring. It's always better to move more concrete than it is to be abstract. So, for example, There are a lot of community colleges in the United States. Okay, that's not a great statement. It's boring. It doesn't really tell me very much. A lot of, is really, really nebulous. So there's a really weak statement. Community colleges enroll a large number of students and play a vital role in American higher education. That's a little better, right? It's getting towards the so what. It's telling me why this is important, right? But it's not great still. So we throw some stats. According to the Department of Education, there's our site, there are more than 1,100 community colleges in the United States. They enroll some 12 million students each year, which is 44% of all U.S. undergrads. Okay, not bad. We've got some numbers. When we talk about visual aids, we'll talk about bringing numbers in to representing numbers in graphical form in some way. Okay. But these are still big numbers. 44% is a tough thing to visualize. 1,100 is a big number. 12 million is a huge number. And so remember when we watched Hans Rosling the other week, he would continue and say, in other words, almost half of the people in the U.S. with college educations received those educations from community colleges, right? So he takes the statistics that are big, and then he uses stats to simplify them, about half of the people, right? So statistics are very useful for simplification. And in fact, these are the three primary ways to support your argument. You're going to use examples, statistics, and testimony. Literally, once I have finished writing a skeletal outline with broad topics dropped into it, just like in the video, I will go through and I will identify which ones need examples, which ones need some statistics, and which ones will benefit from testimony. With examples, you're just using some specific case to represent a general thing, like a group of people or ideas or conditions, experiences. If I'm talking about people who suffer from COVID, I can talk about the millions and millions of people who died from COVID, or the millions and millions of people who were laid up sick from COVID. And that's, distressing because a statistic with millions is big, right? But it's way more effective if I actually tell a story of what it's like to suffer from it. And then it's much more visceral. And when I say 99 million other people suffer from that, then the statistic becomes meaningful. Brief examples. Brief examples are just really short little things that you refer to in passing to clarify an idea, right? So if I'm talking about Bethany needing to be more comfortable, I might bring up, have you ever, gone up to the 5th floor of Anderson in the summertime, right? And then say there are many places on campus that suffer from that. That would be a brief example, just something really quickly that I refer to in passing. An extended example, that's where I actually tell a story that is developed because I want to set a big, long, overarching theme. So there, for an extended example, maybe I describe a girl who's coming to Bethany and she's really excited. She has met some of her professors. She can't wait to get to their classes, and she's motivated. Bethany is her dream college, and she looks at how beautiful it is there, and she's making friends, and it's wonderful. But then she goes to her dorm room, and it's the 5th floor of Anderson. It's 98 degrees in there, and it's a terribly hot day. She puts on her fan, and all it does is move hot air around. And then the next day, her enthusiasm for being at the university is evaporated. It's gone, and now she's not facing the day with optimism anymore. Maybe she goes home and is second guessing whether or not she wants to continue on. That would be an extended example, right? Now I'm using this story to make a point. It's also a hypothetical example because I don't know if this has ever occurred. So I'm just imagining a girl who's going through that, right? Usually in class, if I need somebody to beat up, I beat up on little Timmy. Little Timmy is an imaginary child, and all the worst things have happened to little Timmy. He's had his legs blown off, and he's been abandoned by his parents, and he's been put in those like drawers at fire stations where they give kids, where if you don't want your child, you can leave them there. That's happened to him a bunch of times. So he's a hypothetical kid who takes a lot of abuse to illustrate things, right? Just imaginary fictitious situations that could occur. So when do we use examples? Go through your outline and you're looking for any time you might need to clarify an idea. So for the thing we were just writing about, arches, right? Maybe I want to talk about Doric arches. I'm going to need to do more than just say Doric arches. I'm going to need to actually describe an arch or call to mind something. Maybe at Bethany there's an arch that's in a Doric style, and I can use that as an example to clarify that idea. Examples can reinforce an idea. Maybe I've already said that something is bad, but then I tell a story about someone suffering from it. That'll reinforce and strengthen the idea. That's a great time to use an example. We can use examples to personalize and humanize ideas. Almost always, if you're using a statistic, almost always, you're going to want an example because numbers are not personal. And as you already know from previous classes, the most interesting thing in the world are people. So you use examples to turn statistics into people. You humanize them, you make them interesting and relevant. When you use an example, you want to use one that's rich and vivid, that has lots of descriptive language. We'll talk about developing rich and vivid language when we talk about linguistic devices in a week or two. And then finally, you want to practice your delivery for your examples. Make sure you know what it is that you're really calling attention to and building out. Statistics are the next kind of support that can be given. When you're looking through your outline, anytime you see the words a lot of, or many, or some, or a few, or a growing number, or a decreasing number, all of these call for statistics. These are all numbers things. You should never say many or lots of in your speech. There should always be a number attached to it. So that's literally what I'll do. I'll go combing through my speech and I'll look for anywhere that indicates a number. The earliest, the first, the oldest, the biggest, the most used, right? Anytime there's anything that indicates a number, I should be able to find that number and use it. And if I can't find a number to use, then maybe it's not something I should be talking about. You want to make sure that the numbers that you are getting are actually talking about the thing that you want. That's getting towards reliability, right? Are these numbers actually referring to the thing that you claim they're referring to? Is an actual real indicator, right? And then finally, you want to consider the sources of this information. We already talked about ranked source quality before. Academic journals are to be preferred. That's typically going to be your best source of information. If you have like a source and it's like, you want to talk about cats and there's some cat fact and you got it off of fluffyfriends.com, then in your speech, do not say that you got the statistic from fluffyfriends.com. Cite the author. Cite something that makes it sound better, okay? According to Megyn Kelly, who is a writer about pets in particular cats, blah blah blah. So, give statistics. That'll help with the sound of the source. Now, if Megyn Kelly is not a reliable source, if she doesn't have a reason for saying what she said, then once again, maybe lose that stat. We want to use stats anytime we have to quantify an idea. So anytime your speech has more or less or any words that indicate a quantity of something. We want to use stats to simplify, just like what we talked about with Hans Rosling before, where we took numbers and we distilled them down. When we use stats, we always want to identify our sources, where did this come from, and explain what the statistic means. Never, ever, ever in your speech should you ever just say a number and then not contextualize it. Don't just tell us, there are 11 million community colleges in the United States. Anyway, moving on with life, right? Like, you have to tell us why that's critical, contextualize it in some way. And then, obviously, with statistics, and we talked about this in the past, you want to always have a visual aid with any statistic. There's no occasion in which it's better to just have the number. Always, always have a visual aid to show us what the stat looks like. Testimony. A testimony is any time you bring in an outside party, maybe you're quoting them or you're paraphrasing something that they said, and you're bringing them in to support your argument or support a point. There are two main types of testimony. There's expert testimony. Expert testimony is when it's somebody who really knows what they're talking about and is a master of the topic. And then there's peer testimony, where it's an ordinary person, but they have firsthand knowledge, so they've actually experienced it, right? So, for example, let's say we're doing lutefisk. Lutefisk is this really potent-smelling Norwegian dish of fermented fish. It's really nasty. It's famously bad. At Bethany, we actually used to have like a lutefisk dinner, but it stunk up the whole campus, so they stopped doing it. Anyway, we could bring in an expert. We could have expert testimony. They could talk about what makes good lutefisk and what makes bad lutefisk and how you can tell the difference. They'd be able to talk about where you can find lutefisk and that sort of thing. So they'd give us all sorts of useful information that would be difficult to acquire otherwise. Peer testimony would be if I actually had like one of you guys eat lutefisk, and then you described what it tasted like and what it smelled like for all the other people who weren't eating and tasting and smelling the thing that you were doing. And that would also be valuable. Maybe, for myself, maybe I don't care what an expert thinks lutefisk tastes like. An expert is going to say lutefisk can taste great, even though it's repulsive, right? I want to hear from a peer what they think of it before I try lutefisk, so that'll be much more useful testimony to me when it comes to like wanting firsthand knowledge. If you're going to quote somebody, quotations are weak, as we talked about when we talked about introductions. If you are going to quote somebody, make sure that you quote them accurately. Do not misquote a person. And in fact, I get so nervous about using a quotation, I will typically paraphrase what somebody said instead and just sort of sum up what their position was. If you're using testimonial, make sure that you're being accurate and that you're actually legitimately reflecting what that person said. Use sources that are actually qualified to talk about it. If you're using a peer, then make sure that they actually have firsthand knowledge. If they're an expert, what made them an expert in this particular topic. Use unbiased sources. This is kind of a silly thing to say because bias is literally impossible to avoid. I'll show you why in a few weeks when we start talking about our persuasive speeches. But you want to try to get at least a source that doesn't have an obvious, transparent agenda. And always make sure that when you quote or paraphrase that you are identifying your source, that you tell people where that information came from. That'll help you avoid plagiarism of any kind. All right, I know that was a longish couple of lessons. If you haven't had a chance, watch or watch some anyway. You don't have to watch the whole thing of developing out the skeletal outline, and we've got some projects. I'll talk to you in conjunction with those.